Okay, we started recording again, so that's good. There'll be a few minutes on the recording for poor Alan to edit.
Yeah, you're taking a lot on there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually done a recorded session of it with Microsoft, so there's no huge deal on getting this session because I should have a recorded version of a slightly earlier version of this already. There's a few updates. This one's going to be better.
Okay. I'm excited.
Okay, if I can.
Alan's going to be buried in Premiere. Oh, God. So I've been fighting with Camtasia for most of this week, recording live sessions for stuff. So.
I had my first attempt at recording a presentation and using Camtasia this week, and I actually uploaded my session, but I absolutely hated it.
No, I was supposed to be doing they do these, these Azure training days in the UK.
Yes.
And I was supposed to be delivering a couple of AI sessions in Cardiff. But obviously that didn't happen in Cardiff, so they said, "Can you record your two sessions?" There's a 5-session day AI and ML, and the first two are AI. So I said I'd do the AI sessions.
Yeah.
So I was going to record the two AI sessions, but then said, "Oh, we haven't actually got anybody. We can't find anybody to do the ML." So I ended up doing all 3 ML sessions as well. So so most of this week has been learning and recording the whole.
Yeah, we've been doing. Yeah, we've been doing some of these for Microsoft UK as well. These recordings are a ton of work.
Oh yeah. I didn't realize just exactly how long it would take.
Yeah.
I've done the modernizing apps and data training day before, sort of live, but preparing for a live presentation is somewhat different. But sitting there and recording everything and then realizing that Camtasia's got its audio out of sync and having to go back and re-record that segment, and oh blimey.
I felt like, so basically all my personality was removed from the talk, and it was meant to be really high, like super high level anyway, but then I watched it back and I was like, what is this? But people said, just publish it, and you've got to start somewhere. So but I honestly, it's like I just entered IT. This is the beginning of my career. I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know how to present, and I was like, what?
Okay.
We're approaching 11 here. Jonathan, how long, how tight is your session? Do you want to leave people a couple more minutes to come in before you start?
It is pretty tight. We'll give them a minute, but I could easily go over the hour. Depends how much I do in demos, but we'll give them another minute and we'll dive in. But there's introductory stuff at the beginning, of course, a bit of fluff at the beginning. So if people join a minute late, they're not really missing anything. So,
are you doing an intro of yourself, or do you want us to sort of read a bit?
I have a slide for that. So if that works, and whatever you prefer.
Yeah, that's good.
I have a brief, slide at the beginning.
Yeah.
I've just shared my screen. I don't know if that's.
It's coming. Yep, there it is.
Comes up okay.
Yep.
Okay, super. Now I just need to make sure I hope the demo gods are shining on me.
We've got some people joining. Hey guys.
Yeah, I have my screens full here, so I can't see the chat. So if there are questions in the chat, if someone could just
we'll keep an eye on that, and
okay, super, I might try and rearrange things a bit so I can. Let me see if I can get it to.
It's okay. We'll keep an eye on that.
For the benefit of the audience, by the way, Jonathan says he's happy for you to unmute and ask questions as he's going along if you feel the need. Otherwise, just type into the chat window and we'll relay them for you.
Yep.
Okay, I can just about see the chat. Yeah, I've rearranged it a little bit. But I won't be looking at it, so it makes no difference. Okay, will we start?
Yeah,
let's do that.
I'll put just a brief intro and then we can get started.
Okay.
Okay, hey everyone. If you missed it, Jonathan is happy to take your questions throughout the talk. So if you would like to unmute and jump in, you can do that. Otherwise, if you want to ask a question, you can type it in chat. Myself and Mark will be monitoring the chat and we can jump in and ask Jonathan. So yeah, really looking forward to this session on customer management at scale with Azure Lighthouse. Jonathan, just kick off.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, here we go. So brief intro from me, Jonathan Tuliani. I'm the managing director in Europe with Opsgility. I've been in this role, 2.5, 3 years. Before that, I was nearly 10 years in Microsoft working in the Azure product group. I was the program manager on Azure DNS and Azure Traffic Manager. I was part of Azure long before Azure even had a virtual machine, would you believe? And I was actually part of the team that helped deliver the initial virtual machines release back in the classic days. I'm the author of one of the authors on the Azure Administrator exam reference book, the AZ 103 book. The 104 isn't out yet. And I am a Microsoft certified trainer. So there we go. My role in Opsgility, for those who don't know Opsgility, we're a training provider. We specialize in Microsoft Cloud. We have in-person training and on-demand training. Take a screenshot of that if you're interested. I'll put it up at the end, but we're not going to spend time on that today. Great. Okay, so we're going to talk about Azure management at scale with Azure Lighthouse. This is typically a scenario that's of most interest to partners. And also in some enterprises who are in multi-tenant environments. Large enterprises sometimes end up in multi-tenant situations. So we're going to go through this. We're going to go pretty deep on how to get started, how to use Lighthouse, and the permissions as well. We'll dive into that because there's some subtleties there. This is all about control. It's all about who can manage what. So permissions is a very important part of it. And we'll also, of course, look at the big picture and the scenarios of why you'd like to do this. So let's dive in. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to go pretty quickly, but yeah, do jump in with questions as we go. So let's start with just a bit of revision. I'm going to assume a certain amount of familiarity with Azure here, but we're just going to revise some key points about how access control works in Azure. So in Azure, your identity comes from Azure AD. So Azure AD is where you have the users and the user groups, and also where you have automation that's running, you have the managed identities and service principals. So all the identities are linked into Azure AD, and Azure AD is really outside of your Azure subscription. And in Azure AD, your account in Azure AD is called your tenant, so that's where all your users live within your Azure AD directory and tenant. Think of those as the same thing. That's your Azure AD account with all your users in it. And then, of course, you have your Azure subscriptions where you create your resources, and each subscription is linked to an Azure AD tenant. So your subscription lives within that tenant. And it's, if you have a particular subscription, you can use Azure role-based access control to grant permissions. And when you do a role assignment, it's really combining three things. You're saying, these are the permissions I want to grant. That's a role assign. That's the role definition that the role assignment points to. And you say, these are the users I want to give permissions to. And that's the Azure AD object. And then you say, well, and this is the scope of resources that I want these permissions to apply to. And that could be a subscription, a resource group, or perhaps even an individual resource or a management group containing multiple subscriptions. So that's how you assign permissions, that links together. The assigning of the permissions is what links together the subscriptions and the users. But of course, you can only assign permissions to users who are in your directory. You can't assign permissions to users in a different directory. Okay. So this, of course, is a challenge. When you have a partner who's managing Azure on behalf of other customers, maybe they do cost optimization services. They manage backup and keep ahead of backup services. There's many scenarios or security configurations, governance. There's many things that a partner may be doing on behalf of a customer. So until Lighthouse came along, let's look at the pre-Lighthouse world. There were two technologies available that enabled partners to manage customer subscriptions. And the first of them is Azure AD B2B collaboration. This is where you invite a guest into your tenant. So here the customer, we're going to talk throughout about in this scenario where you have a customer being managed by a partner, and the partner I'd sometimes call the MSP, the managed service provider. So where you have a customer and the partner needs to manage the customer's stuff, which has to stay in the customer's realm because the customer's paying for it. It's staying in the customer's subscription. So you can have the customer invite the partner in as a guest into their directory. So now the partner logs in with their existing credentials. They don't need a new username and password. And once they've logged in with those credentials, they can switch directories. They can switch from their normal partner organization into the customer's organization. and they're in the customer's organization in this guest account, which has a different object ID in the directory, but it's still logged in with the existing credentials. And then, of course, that object ID in that directory, that guest object, can be granted permissions with role-based access control. And this works. It works really well. It's very useful for some scenarios where you're a consultant doing some one-off work with a customer. But if you're trying to manage large numbers of customers, if you're an MSP and you're managing 20 customers, you're going to be switching directories a lot. You're continually switching across that context between directories, and also you don't have any overall view that spans the all of your customers. If you want to get a report of, okay, what's my virtual machine update status across all 20 of my customers, that's going to be hard work. You're going to have to write a substantial amount of work to gather that data across all these tenants, because your automation that you might write has the same problem. It has to continually switch context between these different tenants. There's no built-in roll-up reporting and multi-tenant. Okay, so that's the B2B collaboration. Also, you have to grant permission to individual users here. There's no group management. If you're a large partner with 20 people in your operations team, then the customer has to assign permission to 20 individuals, and they come and go, and that's just a huge mess. So that really doesn't, it works for an individual doing an individual task, but it doesn't really scale. Doesn't scale in terms of the number of users, doesn't scale in terms of the number of customers that the users are managing. The second option is called the AOBO. This is the act on behalf of. And this is a facility within the CSP program. This is where the partner, if they have what's called the admin agent role, if you grant that admin agent role to one of your staff, then that staff member and the partner effectively has owner permissions over all of the CSP subscriptions that are managed by that partner. And that's great. It has that scale across all the CSP subscriptions, but it's a little bit limiting that, again, you have this challenge that you've granted the permissions to the user, and they've got permissions to all of your customers now. So maybe you only want them to manage a subset, and one of your customers is really uptight about this, and you manage them with a different group or a smaller group. But no, it's either all or nothing. So that's a little bit lack of control, and it's also only the owner rights. You can't have any fine-grained access control here where you choose which roles are granted. And also the customer doesn't really have any visibility into this. It's not something that the customer says, yeah, I'm happy for you to have that owner role, because really this is owner and that's it. So these have significant limitations. They're both very useful, but they do have significant limitations. And this is why Lighthouse has been created, is to come up with is to really nail this whole scenario. Okay, so let's have a look. What is Lighthouse? So the goals of Lighthouse are to enable a partner, enable an MSP to manage multiple customers, 10, 20, 100 customers from their tenant without all that switch around that we have with the B2B collaboration. It also has some additional goals. It enables a marketplace channel for those partners. So the partner can publish themselves into this marketplace and say, I'm an MSP, I provide these services, and this is a marketplace. This is a discoverability, it's a lead generation avenue for that partner to make their services available to the customers. It also is a supporting technology behind what's called managed applications, which we're not going to go into too much detail today, but just to say what they are. That's where a partner, an ISV partner, can publish an application that the customer acquires, and the customer installs it in their own subscription. So the customer is paying the Azure costs, but the partner manages it. That's the clue. The clue's in the name, right? It's a managed application. So the partner manages it, and that means that firstly, the customer doesn't have permissions again, even though it's in their own subscription, they don't have permissions to mess with it and foul it up. But the partner does have the ability to go and manage these managed applications in the customer's subscriptions. And that's another one of these multi-tenant management scenarios. So that would be a great talk for another day to talk about managed applications. But for today, we're just going to focus on managing day-to-day resources in customer subscriptions. As I say, we're talking about everything today in the context of partners and customers, although this whole technology does work for non-partner customer scenarios. In particular, if you have a larger enterprise, they sometimes find themselves with more than one AAD tenant. For example, if there's an acquisition, they can easily find themselves with multiple AAD tenants. And Lighthouse is very much designed to help those enterprises manage those multi-tenant situations as well. The other thing to call out is there's no charge for using Azure Lighthouse. You're paying, of course, for the resources you create. This is all about encouraging Azure adoption and making Azure adoption successful. So this is a free service. Okay, so how does it work? At a high level, this is the key concept. It's called delegated access. And the idea is that your customer subscription stays in your customer tenant, But at the same time, that same subscription ID is kind of projected into the partner's tenant. So that this one subscription with one subscription ID can now be managed from two different tenants. It's visible from both tenants. It's that simple, that you're simply projecting the subscription ID into the partner tenant. Now, there's a process for how that's done, and we're going to talk through that. And in particular, what's very nice about that process is that the permissions that you give to the partner is you don't have to just give them owner role. In fact, you can't give them owner role. You get to specify as the customer, when you do this projection of your subscription into the partner tenant, you get to specify or at least review what permissions you're granting. So that's the permissions are controlled, and the customer isn't the customer has visibility into that, and the partner has to work within those boundaries that the customer has seen. There's a little bit of we'll do some demos as we go along, but you can see a little bit of the UI on the screen there, where you can see the global subscription filter has changed for this. This is from the partner view, and they can choose. You can see here where you choose which subscriptions, if you have multiple subscriptions, which subscriptions you want to see in your Azure portal, and you can see here you're able to choose subscriptions from across Contoso and Fabricam. Contoso is the partner, and Fabricam is the customer in this talk. Okay, so let's have a look. One important thing to understand is this is all implemented at the Azure Resource Manager level. This whole tying together of how RBAC works and the multi-tenant scenario, this projection of the subscription, this is happening at the Resource Manager level. So therefore, this is happening on what we call the control plane in Azure. This is where you come in from the portal or PowerShell or CLI or SDKs, or even if you want to hit the REST API directly, you come in through Resource Manager and you're performing resource management operations. You're creating VMs, you're restarting web apps, you're whatever it is you're doing with networks, creating VNets, all the rest of it. So this is all about your resource management. Many of those resource providers expose their own endpoints, and there are various operations where you access those endpoints directly. For example, you can access Azure Storage through the storage endpoint, and you can authenticate in many ways there. You can use the access keys, you can use SAS tokens, but one of the ways you can access Azure Storage is authenticating requests using AAD. You can have AAD permissions to access storage. But because that does not go through Resource Manager, this Lighthouse control does not give access to those resource provider endpoints, those data plane endpoints. So you have a Key Vault endpoint, that again has authentication using AAD, uses AAD tokens to authenticate. But because that's not through Resource Manager, that's not in scope for Lighthouse. This is only about the control plane. So that's very important to bear in mind. Okay, scenarios. Why would a partner want to do this? Well, there's a ton of scenarios, and there's actually a very good documentation around this, and you'll see the link on the slide there for some descriptions of some of these scenarios partners can use this for. So think of all the things partners can do on behalf of their customers. You can be managing backup, managing disaster recovery environments, making sure backup's healthy and so on. So you can do that through Azure Lighthouse, and we may even get to see a very quick demo on that, see how time goes. Just monitoring, managing alerts, being able to trigger automation and so on, and that works very well. Managing policy on behalf of the customer, helping enforce their governance, reviewing policy compliance reports, even automatic remediation can be done. Automating, again, using automation, setting up some automation to manage the resources. And this is a nice feature here, is you can have the automation account that hosts all your automation scripts and so on in your partner tenant, and the automation through Lighthouse can access resources in the customer tenant, and that protects your IP. That means your customers don't get to root around in your automation account looking at all your scripts that you've invested months of labor into. So that's a nice feature. Also, you can manage things in Security Center, Azure Advisor as well, and of course, just managing resources, manage people's VMs, set up their applications for them, whatever they need to do. You can just manage all of that stuff through Lighthouse. Okay. So how do we get started? Let's have a look. There are two ways to enroll in Lighthouse to get this whole thing up and running. One of them is through the marketplace, where as an MSP you can publish an offer through the marketplace and have the customer sign up for that offer. And the other way is completely outside of the marketplace. You can do this through a template deployment, and I'm going to show you how both of those work. So on the marketplace side, the partner they have to be enrolled in the commercial marketplace program. They're going to have to be a gold cloud platform partner and sort of silver or gold. So they have to be enrolled in the marketplace program. And then from there, from the Partner Center portal, they will create what's called a managed service offer. They just do that from Partner Center, from the commercial marketplace program. And within that offer, there's a lot of details you specify in that offer. You'll specify a description of your organization, and you'll upload images of your logos, and you can put links to videos, and there's all kinds of marketing stuff and just stuff that makes that marketplace offer look attractive. But in particular, there's some details you put in what's called a plan. Now, you can have multiple plans within your offer, but typically it's a one-to-one relationship. You just have one plan within your offer. And in the plan, you'll put a title and a summary and a description of your service. And also you'll put your tenant ID, the partner tenant ID, you'll put that. And that's really to say, look, this is the tenant that you're going to be projecting your subscription into if you sign up for this thing. And then you'll also specify whether the plan is public or private. Obviously, public plans are published in the marketplace. Private plans are published, but they're limited in scope. They are only available to certain subscription IDs that you list as part of your offer. So if you want to do this as a special offer just for one customer, you can do that. You list out their subscription IDs in the offer and make it a private plan. You can have up to 10 subscription IDs there. And then you also, as part of your plan, as part of what you're offering to the customer, you list out what permissions you need and who's going to get them. And there's one example of that on the right there of the images where it says manifest. You can see this is the plan manifest. You can see the tenant ID, and then you can see here you say, look, there's the object ID. Now that will typically be a user, or it will be a group, or if it's some automation that you're running, it could be a service principal or a managed identity. So you specify an AAD object ID. These guys are going to get permissions in the customer subscription, and you give them a name, just to describe them. It doesn't come from the directory, so you can put anything you like there, but you describe who that is that's getting those permissions, and you define which role they're going to get. We'll look at that in more detail later. And here you can see they're getting the contributor role. But you don't have to use contributor. You can use a wide range of roles. We'll look at that, and then you go through a publication process for this offer. Now there's some review that goes on there. It'll take a few days. It's kind of published to privately first, and so you can test it. There's a process you go through, but you get this up into the marketplace as you go through that process. Then on the customer side, you will have to go to this thing called the service providers service within the Azure portal, and from there you can add a service provider offer. And you can browse the marketplace, choose your provider, give them contact details, and review the permissions that you're going to be granting them. Obviously, they need your contact details so they can arrange the commercial terms, because there's no billing that comes here between the partner and the customer. The billing is out of band effectively, so the partner and the customer make their own separate commercial relationship. So you accept terms, and there's some terms that make clear that basically if the partner does nefarious things within the customer subscription, Microsoft is not on the hook. This is very much, it's between those guys to trust each other. And of course, this is a trust relationship. I mean, you are giving access to your subscriptions. And then that first step sets up that relationship between the two organizations, if you like, but it doesn't actually get access to anything. There's then a separate step where you go in and you say, okay, we've set that up. Now, which resource groups am I going to give you access to, or am I going to give you access to the whole subscription? You go to this delegate access stage where you actually grant access over to for the scopes that you choose as a customer, the scopes you want to grant access to the partner. So that is how that works. As a customer, you can sign up with multiple partners. There's no reason why it has to be limited to just one partner. You can sign up for lots of partners if you like. Okay, so from the partner point of view again, once the customers sign up, you can go into this My Customers view in the portal, and you can list out the customers, which are the people who've done that initial acquisition from the marketplace to create that relationship. And then you can also go in a separate view, the delegations, where you can see the scopes they've given you access to, which resource groups, which subscriptions, and so on. And you do have the access here as a partner to remove scope delegations if there's something that you've been given access to that you don't want access to, but that will only work if you've set up your offer in the correct way with the correct permissions. So we'll talk more about that as we get into the permissions business. Let's have a look at this. So I'm just going to have a look here. So let me just show you how this works. So we go into Partner Center, we look at the dashboard. obscurity, we are registered in the commercial marketplace just for the purposes of this. So if I go into the overview here of the marketplace, commercial marketplace, you can see here I have one test offer here. This is my Jonathan test. So I click on this offer, and you can also create a new offer, of course. And you can see there's all these tabs here where I set up my offer. I can specify, CRM integration. I can specify, what just for this offer, there are these properties, how does it get categorized, and legal terms and conditions and so on, descriptions and all these things, for my offer listing. And the interesting stuff is under this thing here where it says the plan. So the plan, and again, typically you just have one plan, but you can have multiple. So I go into my plan that's within my offer. This is where all the technical details lives. And in here, the plan has its own listing, has its own description and so on. And it has, pricing and availability. The only supported option at the moment is that it's free, and you have to sort out your commercial relationship with the partner separately. But we may see other options there coming in the future. Here you set your visibility. Is it a private plan? And I can say the subscriptions that have access if it is a private plan. And then in the technical configuration, this is where I will configure you can have some versioning here. You can set the tenant ID, and you can say here who is going to get access. So I say, look, here's an objects ID within my partner organization, within my partner directory. And typically that will be a group rather than an individual user. That will be your operations team or your cost management team or your governance team or whoever it is that's going to be doing this stuff. And you provide that a name for that team, and you say what permissions they're going to get, and you can choose from the permissions from all the built-in roles here, or most of the built-in roles. We'll talk more about the permissions on some of the slides that come up. So here you can specify multiple different teams to get multiple different roles. You don't have to be limited to just a single role assignment. So you can specify the different roles. You can see here this guy is going to have a resource policy contributor. He's going to manage policy. User access administrator is a very interesting one, because if you have user access administrator, you might be thinking, well, if I have that role, well, then I can grant anything, right? I can grant other roles. I can grant owners. I can do anything I like. And they've thought about that. And they recognize that user access administrator is required because, for example, if you're setting up policy and policy remediation, you're going to be creating managed identities, and you need to be able to assign permissions to those managed identities. But of course, they don't want to make this wide open. So there's some limitations here. You have to specify which roles you can assign as user access administrator. So it's not user access administrator, hey, I can assign any role. It's I'm giving you user access administrator, but you can only assign these roles, nothing else. These built-in roles that are listed here. So it's a limited form of user access administrator. And what's more, you can only assign these roles to managed identities. You cannot assign them to users or groups. So you can only assign roles to managed identities. So as a partner, your role assignment capabilities are constrained in that way. And then there's this special role you should always include that we're going to talk more about in the coming slides. Okay, this is the managed service registration assignment delete role. Wow. We'll talk more about that coming up. Okay, so that's your partner. You then go through the publication process for this, and this will appear in the marketplace. And let me just show you how that looks. So if I'm in my Contoso tenant here, and from here, I go to the service providers view. You can also look at it from the Lighthouse view. If I go into Lighthouse, you can get into the service providers piece here. So here, service providers, and you look in the service provider offers, and you just say add offer, and you get to browse. Look, this is all the stuff in the marketplace. BT and CDW, and I mean, you can see there's a huge range of things here. There was one I was playing with earlier, which is from Fujitsu UK. If I go into this one, I can say, okay, I'd like to get the description here. You click create, and okay, let me just go back on that. I missed a step. From here, you can click to the plan as well. So you see the description of the overall service, and then you see the individual plan that you're signing up for. Again, there can be multiple plans. Click create on this, and you can specify which subscription you're going to grant access to. Now, you must be an owner on the subscription to do this, and it's not one where there's some special other role. You can create custom roles that also have the equivalent of capability. No, it's hard coded against the owner role, so you have to be owner, and you can specify where this is going to be delegated. And in the review and create tab here, you get to specify your own contact details. And also here you get to review the permissions you're going to be giving to, in this case, Fujitsu. In this case, it's a nice one because you only give them read access, and then this special remove role that I'll talk about later. So you're not giving them access to actually spend any money on your behalf. But you get the idea. You create this. You just purchase this from the marketplace. But as I say, you have to be subscription owner. I'm not going to do it because otherwise this will appear in the Fujitsu account and it might confuse them. So you get the idea how you purchase this from the marketplace. Perfect. Let's keep going. Okay. So we've talked about, I said there were two ways to onboard. One was from the marketplace and one was from a template. And before getting into the template, we're going to have to understand the object model. So there are two resource types going on under the hood here. The first, they're both in the Microsoft.Managed Services resource provider. The first one is called the registration definition, and the second one is called the registration assignment. For those familiar with policy and with role-based access control, you'll recognize that pattern of definition versus assignment. So in this case, the definition, this is what creates the relationship with the service provider. That's the thing when you make the purchase from the marketplace, not really a purchase, but that if you sign up from the marketplace, the way I was just showing you, that only creates the definition. It creates the relationship, and this is where you say what the tenant ID is and what permissions they're going to have and the plan from the marketplace and so on. This is all on the definition. And then having done that, you then do a registration assignment, and we'll look at how they work. And this is where you say, okay, we're going to assign permission to this particular scope. You're basically linking one of the definitions with one of your scopes, resource group or subscription. So this is what actually lights things up, so that subscription or resource group will now appear within that partner tenant. So that is the second stage. So you can create both of these resources from a template. And there is a GitHub repo. The Azure Lighthouse GitHub repo contains some example templates you can use as a starting point, and they work just fine. The demo I'm using actually just uses a vanilla one of these templates with some parameters that I specify for my tenant IDs and so on. So you just deploy those two resources, and you deploy them at subscription scope. Which means you're only delegating one subscription at a time. If you want to delegate lots of subscriptions, you need to deploy, this across all those different subscriptions. So you create the definition and the assignment. In fact, the assignment doesn't have to be created in the subscription. You could do the assignment in the portal, in the template. You could do the assignment in the portal later. It's the definition that's really important. And in this case, you're not tied to any marketplace offer. You can just do this from any tenant to any other tenant, any subscription to any tenant. You can grant permissions. You could use this across EA agreements, CSP, you name it. This works. It works across all types of subscriptions. Okay, so the way this would work, of course, in a partner-customer relationship is that the partner has to provide all those parameter values to the customer to say, look, this is the template I'd like you to deploy. These are the permissions that it's going to include. This is the tenant ID I need you to include. Here it all is. Customer, if you trust me, please go deploy this template into your subscription, and that will give me permission. And the customer goes and does it. There's a bit of noise there. I wonder if whoever that is, if they have a question, is it? Or maybe we just need to mute someone's microphone. Is there a question?
I think it was muted someone accidentally. And
okay, no problem. Thank you. Okay, let's let's push ahead. Okay, so on the template side, let's just have a look at one of these templates. And here you can see the template. There's a few parameters at the top here. We'll talk about those in a moment. And here are the two resources. This one here is the registration definition, and you can see this contains the name, description, tenant ID, and then the authorizations. This is an object that contains all of those permissions that we talked about. And then here is the registration assignment, and this is simply you deploy it at the scope that you're assigning. In this case, it's going to go at subscription scope. But if you want to deploy a resource at a resource group scope, you deploy the assignment at a resource group scope instead if you wanted to delegate a resource group. And here it just has one property, and that is, well, what's the registration definition that I'm referring to that is relevant here. So you simply link to the definition and put it at the appropriate scope to create an assignment. So that's straightforward enough. The parameters. You provide, a description of the services, and you provide your tenant ID, and then you have this object for the authorizations where you say, look, here's the AAD object ID that I'm granting permission to. This could be a security team or an individual, whatever it is. And here's the role that I'm granting. And nicely, you can put comments on these because otherwise it's just a bunch of GUIDs and who knows what they say. But you can get these role definition IDs easy enough using PowerShell for each of the built-in roles. So it's just a simple enough structure here. And here's the user access administrator one with the delegated role definition ID saying, look, they're going to have the ability to grant the contributor role. So that's how that works. So that's straightforward enough. And then you can simply deploy this. So here is the path to those files, and it's just a new AZ deployment. This is a subscription level deployment, run, and this will take 30 seconds to deploy, so we'll just wait for that. Any questions while we wait for the deployment? No, everything's crystal clear. Or they've left.
No, we've still got quite a big audience.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, they're all just stunned and amazed.
Stunned and amazed, yeah.
Oh, here we are. Why would one choose ARM templates over the marketplace experience? Is a question.
Good question. Yeah. So you may not be in the commercial marketplace. You may not be a Gold Cloud Platform partner. You may, for example, be doing this in an enterprise where you're in a multi-tenant enterprise environment. So that's one very good reason. You might be just learning how to do this, and you want to just evaluate Lighthouse from a dev test point of view, from a evaluation point of view. Certainly from a partner point of view, if this is part of your commercial offering, then it does make sense to move towards the marketplace one option as you go forward. But I can certainly see the scope for using the template one. For example, while you're developing your marketplace offering, and it's going to take you a little while to figure out exactly which permissions you should be requesting and so on, and just to make sure that this works the way you think it does. So you can do that within your own subscriptions without messing around with the marketplace. Because don't forget, the marketplace publishing is a couple of days, 2-3 days it could take. So if that's your kind of dev test cycle, then it's going to be pretty slow. Whereas here you can just edit your template, change the permissions, and redeploy it, in a couple of minutes, the way I've just been deploying here. So I think there's a lot of value in the template scenario. But if you are working with real customers, then I agree the marketplace offering adds credibility, and you should aim for that as the kind of production grade approach. Does that answer the question?
Yep, that's clear apparently.
Super. Okay, so this deployed, awesome, success. And let's go and have a little look. Where's my Azure portal? Here it is. So here I'm in 2 different accounts. Fabricam, here, see at the top right here, I'm in the Fabricam directory on this second tab, and I'm in the Contoso on the first tab. Contoso is the partner, Fabricam is the customer. So here, if I go into the service providers view, you'll see I've actually delegated to Contoso twice, because I do this demo using Azure Pass subscriptions, and I've had some Azure Pass subscriptions that have expired, and because they're expired, they're disabled, and I can't clean it up. So this first one is a legacy from previous demos, but this bottom one is the one I've just created. This is where I've actually created this delegation to the Contoso organization. And then the delegations here, again, there's 2 of them, because one of them is on this disabled Fabricam subscription. But this is the one I just did. This is the subscription that I'm logged in. This is the subscription. If I go back to the PowerShell Fabricam subscription 3, you can see here, if I do a get AZ context, you can see Fabricam subscription 3 is the subscription I'm actually in here. That was the subscription that I did this deployment from. So that's a subscription I've delegated. So here I have I can see I've got this delegation in place, and I could here add additional delegations. You can see here I can choose to delegate. If I choose my provider, it's going to be to Contoso, and I can then choose to delegate subscriptions or resource groups. But the delegate subscription only works. This is something I think is a bug. Look, I can choose a different subscription and try to delegate it, but it will fail because I haven't got the registration definition in that subscription. The registration definition is only deployed at subscription scope. So the UI lets you try and delegate different subscriptions from where the definition is, which I think is silly because it doesn't work. And you can't create the definition at management group scope. So there's something a little bit peculiar there. But you can choose here what scope you're going to be delegating, whether that's a subscription or a resource group. And this is just creating that second resource. As I said, I could have done the template just to do the first step, the definition, and then I can do the delegation piece here. This works just fine. Okay, so enough there. If I switch to Contoso, you can see in my global subscription filter, I can choose directories. You can see I can choose which directories I'm looking at, and I could have 20 different companies here that I work with. And I can then choose subscriptions, and there's Fabricam subscription 3 available to me. I've got it alongside Contoso subscription 3. And from there, I can now look at, suppose I just want to look at virtual machines. I can see here, look, virtual machines. I've got 2 virtual machines in my view. One of them is in Contoso, one of them is in Fabricam. How awesome is that? Yeah, they're just there now. It's just like I'm working within my normal tenant. It's pretty cool. Okay. Fantastic. Let's push ahead. Okay, let's have a little bit of a look at the permissions that we need to do this, because again, permissions are important here. So obviously, as an MSP, you've got to publish the marketplace offer, and that all comes down to your marketplace, your partner center access. So you'll need to be in the commercial marketplace program, and that requires a silver gold cloud platform competency. You'll to accept the customer, for the customer to actually acquire your offer from the marketplace, doesn't require any steps, any action from the partner at all. And also, when I did that demo just now, and I deployed that, if I deployed that template, all I needed was Contoso's tenant ID. So if any of you put your tenant ID in the chat, I can deploy that subscription giving you access, and there's nothing you can do about it. If I know your tenant ID, I can grant you access. So simple as that. You can't stop me giving you access. So you may not want access, but that's tough. If I know your tenant ID, I can do it. That's the way it works. Now, remember that special role we talked about, the managed services registration assignment delete role. Wow. That role gives you all those roles that you specify in your marketplace offer. Those roles, that's what permissions you have in the customer's subscription. And don't forget, these 2 resources that set up the relationship, they both live in the customer's subscription. So if I just come over here, you can see that from the Contoso side, if I go to my customer's experience, I can look at the delegations. That should work. Let's just refresh. There we go. So there's the Fabricam subscription that we just created from the template. That's why it says no marketplace offer. This came from the template, and I can delete this, and this will work because I have that role included in the template. And in your marketplace offers, you should always include that role. That gives you the ability to do this delete. But if I was Fabricam and I deployed this same template, but I didn't give you that delete role, well, then you wouldn't be able to delete this. You would have permissions, and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, you can raise a support ticket to get rid of it, I'm sure, but there's no self-service way for you to actually remove those permissions. I've given you permissions, and you can't get rid of them. And likewise, if you look at the customers list, this is the definition that creates this entry here. This one you can't delete. There's no special permissions to delete this. You're stuck with this one. Only owners can delete this, and you can't be given owner permissions. So this one you're stuck with. So if I have your tenant ID, I can just pollute your view with potentially hundreds of unwanted tenants. So that's a little unfortunate. And the product group, I have spoken to them, and they are aware, and there are plans in place to improve this in the future, to give the partner a little bit more control and the ability, a stronger abilities to evict unwanted customers. But at the moment, that's how it works. Okay. So that is these permissions here. So that was for this setup piece. On the customer side, to purchase that offer from the marketplace, you need to be the owner on the subscription, and it's not supported on custom roles. It has to be the full-on subscription owner role. Service admin doesn't do it. You have to actually be the RBAC owner. If you're a service admin, you'll have to go and grant RBAC owner, and then you go from there. And And to do the delegation on the subscription or resource group, again, is tied to the owner role. So personally, it drives me nuts when Microsoft does this and ties things to the owner role rather than having it just to specific permissions within the owner role, because this means you can't have any fine-grained access on this. If you need to be the owner for some other reason, so for example, you need to be the owner because you're using blueprints with system assigned managed identity, that again requires owner role. If you were owner for that reason, well then someone gave you owner role so you could do that, but now you can do this as well, which they didn't want to let you do, but there's no avoiding it because they don't really work. They don't properly respect RBAC. You can't do it in custom roles. It's tied, hard-coded to the owner role. That's how that has been designed. Okay, so that's the permissions you need on the customer side. On the MSP to manage this, as we said, the registration definition defines the list of permissions that you are going to be given. And we've talked about how that works. And you should always include that delete role in your marketplace offers. But as I say, someone doing it from a template doesn't have to include it. So then you're just stuck with them. Okay. So limitations around these roles. You can only use built-in roles. You cannot assign custom roles across to the partner. It's built-in roles only, and it's only RBAC roles, no classic roles. And also remember we said this only works on roles on activities that come through Resource Manager. When you're accessing something like a Key Vault endpoint that is perhaps using AAD authentication but not coming through Resource Manager, it's just a data plane operation. Those are not supported in Lighthouse, and for that reason, any roles using data actions are not supported. It's only actions, not data actions, which is most of the normal roles. Just there are some specific roles that use data actions for accessing these data endpoints, so they don't work. You can't assign the owner role, and there are limitations on the user access administrator role, which we talked about already. They can only assign the roles which are listed, and it can only assign them to managed identities. And the last thing, which I hope they fix, is resource locks are not respected. If you as a customer have some resources that are locked, the partner, the locks don't apply. It's as if they're not there. Blueprint locks work fine because they work in a different way. They work using a RBAC deny assignment. That's a talk for another day. But the standard resource locks aren't respected, bizarrely. I hope they fix that. Okay, so let's have a little look at how delegated resources are managed. We've already seen the global subscription filter, how you can choose your directory and choose your subscriptions within that view. And we've also seen the standard view where you can just see, look, these are my virtual machines, and across all the resource types, of course, virtual networks, public IP addresses, I don't know, data bricks, whatever it is, you can list them out and just manage them as if they're in your tenant in a normal subscription. It's, that's just awesome. You have these standard views in the portal, the virtual machine view we just talked about, but then you have a security center. Again, security center respects the global subscription filter. So if you've selected multiple subscriptions, hey, it's going to work, and you can have a security center dashboard that covers 10 of your customers. You can have that, a single dashboard covering everything across your customers rather than having to switch context the whole time. So that works beautifully. Similar for Azure Advisor. Security Center and Azure Advisor both respect the global subscription filter. So that works very nicely. And there are some services that are moving to be Lighthouse aware, if you like. Backup Explorer is a new feature of Azure Backup, and they've done a nice job of making this work multi-tenant, so you can view backup across, you can monitor backup status across backups, across vaults, across recovery service vaults, across regions, across tenants, across subscriptions, across everybody. So you can have a nice single view there. Although I think they're missing something in this view. It doesn't actually have a column that tells you which customer it is. So that's a bit of a gap. But I think you can click in and you can work it out. I hope they add that column in the future. Okay, so that's the standard views to manage resources. Management groups. This is a bit of a gap, if you like. Basically, they don't work. From a customer point of view, if you're purely working within the customer tenant, as a customer, you can use management groups as normal. You can set your subscriptions into a management group hierarchy, use the management groups for RBAC policy, view cost reports or compliance reports at management group scope. Everything works from a customer point of view. But once you come into Lighthouse, that customer management group hierarchy is not visible to the partner. So the partner sees these delegated subscriptions and delegated resource groups, but they've no visibility into the customer's management group hierarchy. So there may be policy that's assigned there, for example, that the partner cannot see. So they might see deployments that are being denied. It's like, oh, why can't I create this G series VM? And it's because there's a policy there, and it's a policy violation. The policy will apply, but the partner can't see the policy because they have no visibility into the management group. So on the customer side, so that's how that works. But what about the MSP's management group hierarchy? Well, obviously the MSP have their own tenant, and within that tenant, they can build their own management group hierarchy where they can put their own subscriptions. However, you can't put these guest subscriptions, these customer subscriptions, delegated subscriptions into your partner management group hierarchy. You can only put your actual real partner subscriptions in. So that doesn't help you either. So effectively, management groups are just not part of the game here. So that means if you are handling things like policy, then as a partner, you may be providing governance services across a number of customer subscriptions within a single customer, then you're going to have to do things like policy on a per subscription basis. You're not going to be able to manage that customer at a management group scope. You're just going to have to apply this across at the per subscription level, which is fine. You might want to invest in some automation around that, but that's fine. If you are doing policy on behalf of your customer, then the other thing is, of course, because your policy has been assigned at subscription scope, even though you might have the same policy assigned across 10 subscriptions within one customer, you're not going to get an aggregated view of policy compliance because you're going to get 10 different compliance reports because it's 10 different policy assignments. There's no aggregation there. So that's unfortunate that there's no way to do that. Policy remediation, this is where you have some policies, if it's a deploy if not exists or a modify policy, they can where resources are non-compliant, you can run a remediation job which will go fix up those resources for you. It's a fairly advanced feature of Azure policy, but just be aware that it can work. You can set up remediation and get this to work and remediate across into the delegated scopes, but it requires some special setup. I'm not going to go through the step-by-step on that, but just be aware that there's a documentation page that will walk you through it. You will need to deploy the policy assignment from a template. You can't do it any other way. It has to be a template deployment because it needs to use a preview resource ID on the role assignment for the managed identity. And that preview role assignment includes this. There's a parameter there on the screen. You see delegated managed identity resource ID. What a mouthful. It looks very complicated, and you look at it and you'll scratch your head and bang your head against the desk for a while thinking, what on earth is this trying to say? But just copy and paste out the documentation, fill in the right GUIDs, and it works. So I have done it. It does work. The documentation is good. It doesn't really explain what's going on. Just it does work though. So that's how that works. So you can get remediation to work. If you try hard enough. Activity log, everything works as you would expect it to. So if the customer does stuff, it goes into the customer's activity log, and the MSP has visibility into that log, assuming they have the reader role. Also, if the MSP does action in the customer subscription, then those MSP actions also go into the customer's activity log. They don't go into the MSP's activity log. They go into the customer's activity log. And that means they're visible to the customer, and it will show the identity of the user within the MSP who performed the action. So you can set up alerts on the activity log, automation, all of this. Everything should just work as normal. So the activity log just works. It works really nicely. We can have a look at some of these things. How are we for time? Okay, we're okay for time. We're at the end here now. So let's just have a quick look, and then we can take any final questions. Here we are. We've seen this view already. We saw the. Let's just go. Yeah, this is in the Contoso tenant. So we're in the partner view here. If we look at those virtual machines again, we can see here we have the Fabricam machine, which is in the customer tenant, and we can do. This is running. We can do. Let's say we're going to stop this machine. Yeah, do we want to stop it? Do we want to reserve the public IP? No. Okay, let's just stop that machine. So now this is us stopping the machine on behalf of our customer. And we can look in a minute or two and we'll see the entry in the activity log for that. So that just shows, we can actually do stuff. We have permission. Again, I have contributor permissions, if you remember. Let's have a look at some other things we can use here. If let's say security center. Here, this will just give us a standard overview. And you can see here 2 compute apps and resources. If I click into this, This is showing me VMs. Oh, look, I've got 2 different VMs here, again, from Fabricam and Contoso. So I'm getting my recommendations coming through. Just whatever's in the global subscription filter is going to come through here. It just works fine. If I look at Recovery Services Vault, if I just find one, we can, there it is. So I'm looking at the Fabricam Recovery Services Vault here, and I can go to if you haven't used this before, it's fantastic. So they've had these 2 new things here, Backup Reports and Backup Explorer. Reports is kind of deep dive reports based around log analytics. That takes a bit of setting up. But Backup Explorer, I believe, is built directly off the resource graph. So it's there for free. It's automatically set up for you. It just works. So anytime you're doing Azure Backup, you can always just go into the Recovery Services Vault and click on the overview blade, click Backup Explorer. It's always there, always works. And this gives you just an overall dashboard of your backup state over the last, it covers about 7 days data. And you can choose here, even though I went in from a particular vault, you can actually, that's just your entry point to this view. And from here you can choose, I'm going to cover this across all my subscriptions, including from both tenants. I'm going to do this for all my vaults. I might have vaults in various locations here. I've got vaults in both of my tenants, actually, but I could have 100 vaults here. I could have lots of different vaults. And I can see here what my backup items are. I can list out my backup items. I've got my backup for both Contoso and Fabricam. So I'm getting a lovely multi-tenant view of my backup all in one place. I could identify machines that don't, now there aren't any, but I could identify machines that don't have backup enabled, all from one view across all of my customers, which is pretty cool, I have to say. That's pretty awesome. Let's have a quick look at that activity log. If I go to the virtual machines, it was this one that we stopped, wasn't it? If I just go into the activity log for this machine, we should see, look, deallocate, there it is, accepted, it's run, that's happening. And if I switch tenant now, I'm going into my Fabricam identity. So I'm in the Fabricam, I'm here now, I'm the customer. And within this space, I might again want to look at, well, what virtual machines do I have? Well, I only see the one, of course. I don't see the Contoso VM. And in here, I might look and think, oh, this one's deallocated. What on earth's going on there? Who did that? I can go into my activity log, and there I see it. I see the deallocate that the customer did on my behalf, and I can dig into this, and I can see exactly what's gone on here. I can see the JSON of this. And I can see who did, look, caller, JAT Labo 1, and this is the identity of the user I'm using over here on Contoso, you can see. So this would be, typically, I mean, this is an Outlook.com because it's a Azure Pass subscription, but this could have been a JAT Labo 1 at Contoso.com. This, I'd see here, oh, look, that was Jonathan in the Contoso. He stopped my VM. I wonder why he did that. If I want to complain about it, I can, phone up and it's all visible to me. So there's nothing hidden from the customer. Okay, that's it. Questions? We have a few minutes left for questions before we hand over to the next session.
So people feel free to unmute and just ask questions directly. Do we have any?
Does anyone have any questions? Oh, there's a little bit of echo.
Oh, that's probably my mic picking that up.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an ops person, Jonathan, but just as you were going through that, you seem to be bumping up against a few rough edges. Would you say this is, production grade yet, or?
It's still officially in preview. I think it's certainly. I mean, it does work. I mean, fundamentally, it does work. There's a little bit confusing thing in the UI, as I say, where it gives you the option to delegate subscriptions that you haven't actually created a definition for, which then, of course, fails. So there's something a little bit rough in the UI there. But other than that, where it's, so that's something that's not supposed to work that the UI is letting you attempt. But the stuff that's supposed to work does work. So that's what I would say there.
It does what you need it to do.
Yeah.
And I think this is amazing. Like I'm actually wowed by it. I used to work in the managed service provider space and was sort of responsible for creating a managed service wrapper around Azure for more traditional service provider. So I love this. This is great.
Okay, yeah, because if you are in that space, then you look at this and you go, "Oh my God, this is awesome!" I mean, conceptually, it's actually really, really powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of enterprises, they'll look at this thing and think, yeah, doesn't apply to me, don't care. I mean, that's fine. But
then,
if you are a partner, this is awesome.
Yeah, like you said as well, if you're part of like a large organization, and you have different tenants, or you've just
then
been
it's a big deal.
onto an acquisition, or you mucked up at the beginning and you have multiple tenants, because that's definitely a problem that some people have. I think this is great. I've like literally sent people that I used to work with links to it already.
Okay. Yeah, there's a copy of this talk actually that Microsoft recorded and is supposed to go on YouTube at some point. So if anyone wants that, then feel free to ping me. I'm just going to put my my details in the chat there.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
So I'll put my details there, and then if we're done, then I just have the blatant plug, of course, that this is us. Everyone who's locked up at home and is keen to study Azure, then just sign up to Skill Me Up. It's awesome, and you'll see there we have our the blatant plug. So yeah, we have hands-on labs. Live instructor classes, expert talks, and videos. And if there's speakers actually who are interested in giving expert talks, do reach out to me, because we do pay for expert talks for the Skill Me Up live service. So, but yeah, you can get certified, and also loads of deep dive stuff that goes well beyond certification, stuff like this. So that's that. There's the blatant plug.
If you can get me an MCT, I'll do it for you.
Super. There we go. Okay, so I guess with that, we should I'll let you guys take over. And I managed to finish on time, just about.
Yeah, you did. Very good.
I had to go fast. I hope it was clear for everybody.
And I think we've got Duncan in the house, so we can just get him set up as a presenter. We'll do that now.
Okay, I'm going to drop off. I'll just unmute and stop sharing and so on.
Okay, cool.
Okay, super. Thank you, everybody. And enjoy the rest of the day. I think there's some great sessions. So and thank you to our hosts as well. It's it doesn't work without all the work that's going on in the background. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jonathan. Much appreciated.
Cheers.
Awesome. So Duncan, we've made you a presenter, so we'll just give you a few minutes to get set up.
Okie dokie. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wow, I'm surprised. Okay, brilliant. I will share the screen, and oh no, there was something about hiding all the video as well. Turn off incoming video, and I will share the screen. If you could let me, what's my options here?
We'll let you know. I got a little bit confused with sharing the screen also.
Yeah, so the entire desktop, it's like
you can see the screen.
You can see the screen, you can see my presentation, you can see the wizard behind the curtain.
Yes. So how would you like to keep all the questions to the end? Would you like people to ask them in chat?
Ask them in chat, because I'm not convinced that my internet is going to be brilliant here. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm in Lincolnshire. So what I'll do is I'll actually pause a number of times. So basically after each key thing, I'll pause and just see if everyone is okay, or if any questions. So
probably turn off your own video as well and just leave it with the presentation, unless you.
Okay. No problem. You don't like the look of my bedroom, no?
Come on if you like.
No. I was just joking.
Okay, cool. Mark, do you want to introduce this one?
I suppose I could do. Yes, Duncan, I know from Twitter, he says many knowledgeable things about serverless and event sourcing. So I'm looking forward to this one. He seems to know his bananas. So yes, this should be a good one. I'm certainly looking forward to it. I will almost certainly have questions at the end.
Okay, good.
Not wishing to build you up too much there.
No, exactly. I mean, it's difficult to follow that. Okay, are we good to go?
Yeah, kick off.
We're good to go. Okay,
we'll leave it at 30 seconds. Just we're not quite 12 o'clock.
Oh yeah, I'm getting far too ahead of myself and excited. That's we're ahead of time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just want. Yeah, there we are. We've ticked over to 12, so
yeah.
officially. We'll go. Okay, fire away.
Okay, so good afternoon now. That's brilliant. Thank you very much for lending me your time. My name is Duncan Jones, and the presentation that I'm going to be doing here, if this works, is event sourcing and CQS on Azure serverless functions. And what this basically is a way of building systems or partial systems on top of a purely serverless substrate. That's a good way of putting it. And so basically, the agenda for today, I'm going to go through the motivation, which is why you would do this in the first place. That's a good thing to start with, because if it doesn't apply to you, then that's probably best not to worry about the rest of it. Then an introduction to event sourcing. The system as a whole is based on event sourcing. So in order for me to explain the detail, to get into the weeds, I need to talk about event sourcing. It will be the most basic introduction. So, don't report me to Greg if I get it wrong or anything like that. It really is just to get you familiar with it. Then a walkthrough example to show you how event sourcing works behind the scenes. Then I move on to notifications, which is how the different parts of the systems communicate with each other. And that's using Event Grid, Azure Event Grid, so I'll talk through that. A couple of things I'll do a little bit differently in this one is because it's not entirely interactive, so I will pause after each major thing. That's what that rather terrible graphic there is about. I'll pause after each major topic and leave a little bit of time for questions. And basically, if you have questions at any point, can you just put them in the chat window, and then when I reach a pause, you can stop me there. Oh, and the other thing I'm going to do is, again, because of the constraints of the internet connection, I'm going to leave all the show and tell stuff to the end. So anything that could potentially cause it to go horribly wrong, I'll leave that to the end. And basically, even when it does, you won't have missed too much, I hope. Okay, so a couple of caveats, though, before we begin. So caveats is that what I'm talking about here is it's for relatively small systems, and I haven't battle tested it. So don't go and put it into production in a nuclear power station tomorrow. That would be a mistake. And the other caveat is that what I'm talking about here is an experiment that I have done rather than a sort of definitive lecture. So, take that on board. If you think this is something you'd like to do, have a little play with the code, adapt it to your circumstances and so on. Okay, motivation. Why would we do this at all? So the promise of serverless, the promise certainly that you will see in the marketing brochures, is low cost and scaling to zero. So basically what you're looking for is systems where if you're not using it, or if your customer's not using it, even more importantly, it doesn't cost you very much money, or indeed it doesn't cost you any money at all. And the two sources of cost that we need to address in this is, the first one is fixed costs. So that's represented here by the immersion heater. If you're as old as me, you'll know that these things are never to be left on. And I'm even looking at that photo. I'm actually worrying now if I have left it on. But basically, that explains fixed costs. So fixed costs are things that you have to leave on all the time for when your users come in. It has to be ready and warm. And the second one is over provisioning. So where you have to have excess resource put aside to deal with peaks of demand, so you can ramp up quickly. And this is something that actually Azure Serverless Functions does very well. So I'm not going to add too much to that, but basically it is a motivation for using Azure Serverless Functions. So event sourcing. Event sourcing is a way of storing state or data. And in a traditional model-based system or a database or whatever, the way you do that is you store the current state of whatever your things are and you update them. What you do in event sourcing is you don't store the current state, but rather you store all the things that have happened to your entities over time as an event stream. And then you recreate the state by going through that history. And I think the best way I can really explain that is with this very hello world example. So imagine a bank account system, and you'll notice that event sourcing is nearly always demoed with bank accounts, but imagine a bank account system for my nephews and for their pocket money. So we start with this situation where there's no data at all in the system. Aiden comes along and he opens his account. and he deposits $10. And you can see the events going across there. So basically, one event for opening the account, one event for depositing money. Similarly, then Margaret comes in. She does likewise. She deposits her $10. And then Fergal comes in, but on the way to the bank, he's actually managed to spend half his pocket money. So he only deposits the $5. And you can see the history building up for these entities. Aidan, having seen what Fergal has bought, decides he wants the same. So he withdraws $5. Then Margaret, seeing how this bank is being run, decides that she wants nothing more to do with it. So she withdraws all her money and closes her account. And you can see there that we're building a history of the events that have occurred to each, I'm going to call them entities, but you can give them any name you want, each uniquely identifiable thing. And that's fine getting the data into the system, but you also need to get the data out of the system. And you do that with something that's called a projection. So a projection is a very minimal piece of code, and it has two parts to it. The first part is, for each event, as it's going through the event stream, the question is asked, do I care about this event? And then the second part is, if I do care about the event, what am I doing with it? So if you look at this example here, the projection to get the current balance of the bank account. So we will start with opening the account. Do I care about that in terms of getting the current balance? I don't, so I skip over it. When you get to the deposit money, I do care about that event. So we're increasing the balance by the amount in the deposit money event. Then we get to the withdraw money event. I do care about that, and we reduce the balance by that amount. So at this stage, what we're saying is we've got the actual state. And what I also do, sorry, I'll give you a couple of seconds to find the mute there. Okay, and what I also do whenever I run a projection is I return the as of event number that projection value is valid for. And I'll show you why that is later on, but this is an important thing to know about projections, that basically what we're saying is we get the state, but we also get the state as at a particular point in the projection, in the event stream. There are some rules that basically make event sourcing, that if you don't follow, make event sourcing very, 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 very difficult. So basic rules for event sourcing. The first one is that event streams are append only. So you can only add events to the end of an event stream. And that gives you an idea of the history in which they occurred. And the second really hard rule, which is why they're in bold, is that events are immutable. So you can't edit the data in an event. Now, there's a very obvious thing that should pop to everyone's mind there, which is what do you do when someone has made a mistake? And the answer is you have to do a reverse and rebook kind of event. So if you imagine that in our bank account example, rather than depositing $10, we had managed to withdraw $10, we have to deposit $10 to undo the withdrawal, and then we have to deposit another $10 so that we get back to where we're supposed to be. And that does mean that when you're designing an event source system, you want to think about events as having undoability. So you need to, say, how am I going to get back to where I was if I've made a mistake? And then there's some guidelines, which I do think help a lot, but, I'm not going to come around your house if you don't do this. The first one is that event names should be in the past tense, because you're communicating that this is a thing that has happened. So that's, for example, money withdrawn, not active withdraw money, because that would be more of an active event. And the second one is that events are for one entity, so one thing that can be uniquely identified and which has a history. So first of the pauses, just to make sure that event sourcing hasn't caused angst and confusion. Are there any questions to this stage?
Nothing in the chat. Just one quick question there. You're saying that things are immutable there.
Yes.
Does that mean that, for instance, suppose, it's a bit of a, sort of not entirely technical question here, but GDPR, somebody comes along and says, please remove all my data from your system. So, you could delete it from the database, but then you've still got an event in there, presumably saying, data created and another event saying data removed, but that data is still in the data created event.
Yes. So when I do this talk face to face, I usually have little toy crocodiles to give out as prizes. And that's the question that always gets the prize. So GDPR, obviously, when I say events are immutable, I mean in the standard business process. You can have another process that you either shred the GDPR content of the event, or you can have the GDPR content already held in an encrypted manner and throw away the keys or anything like that. So yeah, they are immutable, but with exceptional exceptions. Yes, exactly. I mean, and that is the same as if you had a database where there was no application way of altering data, you could still phone up the DBA at 3 o'clock in the morning and get it done. So yes, it is possible. The reason it's not done in actual normal business is that you rely on the state, and if the state was able to change, you'd have to rebuild it. You wouldn't be able to rely on it. So.
I'm just wondering, what happens when you try and rebuild with data that's actually changed?
Yeah. So I mean, you can do it. You run the projection again, and you do that. But as a general rule, it's best to go forwards.
Okay.
Okay. So the walkthrough example, which I hope will make this more obvious, and will also show you some of the pitfalls of event sourcing on an Azure Functions system. There's a URL there if you want to play along at home. It just brings up a Blazor front end, which you can enter transactions in and whatever you want to do. It's a very, very simple banking example, so just an extension of what I talked through in the first part. The Blazor is not particularly pretty because I'm not a front end person, so I just sort of hacked it together. But with that in mind, let me talk you through the way it goes. So our first command is to open a new account, and the constraints that we've been given are each account number must be unique. So I'm not allowed to open an account if that number has already been used, and I'm passing in the account number as a parameter here. I'm imagining it that way around. And we have some additional things that we can add in. So we can say you can open an account with an initial deposit, and also when you open an account, you can also pass in the beneficiary name. I've made both of those optional. If you do work in banking, remember that they are not optional because the lawyers will come after you. But that's basically what it's saying. But this introduces us to the villain of the piece, the concurrency crocodile. So this is essentially a kind of defect that can occur, nearly only really occurs in production, and it's where two functions are trying to do the same thing at the same time. So my bit where I'm saying each account number must be unique. What happens if I am running two or more Azure functions that have got the same account number when they're trying to create them? And let's look at how we do that. So start with the Azure function definition. And as you can see, basically standard HTTP triggered function. And the only difference is at the bottom, we've got an event stream that I'm creating. And that takes the account number passed in via the HTTP route and turns it into our event stream unique identifier. And three parts to this: there's domain, entity name, and instance. So that's basically my unique key of my event stream. And that allows us to have systems with different domains in, different entity types, or whatever, and basically still keep everything reasonably organized. So step 2. So I'm opening my new account. The first thing is, does the bank account number already exist? If it does, I'm just returning a forbidden, so you're not allowed to do that. The second step is, having got past that, we are going to put a created event on the event stream. Now the created event is also going to create the event stream. So that will be our first event. And what you'll see here is we have two checks. So the first one is the business level one of just saying the account number also already exists. But the second one is we also include a constraint when we're appending the event, the account opened event, just saying that this event stream must be new, and it will fail with it will throw an exception if the event stream already exists. And that's basically our way of preventing the concurrency crocodile from giving us a good bite there. Having done that, we have two additional parts that we can do. So there are two optional parameters that we passed in. So if we've passed in an opening balance, we put that in a money deposited event and append that to the end of the bank account events event stream. And similarly, if we have given the beneficiary name, we create a beneficiary set event. So this is to show you how one command can actually lead to more than one event. And then how does it get stored? So it goes into a table. This is a standard Azure table. I think they've now moved into Cosmos DB, but this is just basically a straightforward NoSQL table. And I'm using the unique identifier of my account as the partition key, and the row key is basically the number of the event. So that's an incremental sequence number. The row 0 gives you information about the instance. So that's basically saying what domain, entity type, instance key, and so on it is, and also gives you the last sequence number used. And then as you go through each event, it basically appends the event type onto the, a row with the event type, and then whatever data pertains to that particular type of event. So you can see here we've got an account opened, money deposited, etc. So that's basically the life cycle of a single account. Making a deposit, we've got the same rule that says a target account must exist. We don't have a concurrency crocodile thing here because, you know, if two people make the deposits at the same time, that doesn't matter to us. Parameters, we have a deposit amount, so how much is going to be deposited, and then optionally you can put in some text to say where the deposit came from. And again, the function body is basically, does the bank account exist? If it doesn't, throw a forbidden HTTP response. But if it does, we're creating the money deposited data, which is our event, and simply appending it towards actually on the end of the event stream. So that's that one. Getting the balance. So this is about getting the data back out again. So what we're going to do is we're going to run a projection. And obviously, in order to get the balance, we need the account number itself. So the account number from which the balance, that must exist. And the second parameter we can pass in is an as of date. And this demonstrates one of the sort of quite powerful properties of event sourcing, which is that you can run a projection to any point in the event stream. So as well as asking what the state is now, it's quite straightforward to ask what the state was last year, yesterday, etc. So you can pass in the parameter, the as of date for the balance to get, and it will just run the projection up to that point. So let us look at our projection. So this is just the HTTP trigger again. This time it's a get because we want to get data, and we're just passing in the bank account and account number, but as well as that, we're passing in the name of the projection. So we're saying this particular projection is the one I want to run. And the reason being that this allows you to have different projections over the same entity. So you might have one that says your balance, you might have one that says last 10 transactions or whatever, and they can all be independently run. Yeah, type of projection to run. And the balance projection, as I said, it's just got two parts to it. So the first part is, do I care about this event? And the way I'm indicating that here is with the I handle event type interface. So everything that has got that in it in the projection class, it does process. Anything that hasn't got one of those, it just skips over. And then obviously, what am I doing with the event when I get it? So with the money deposited event, what I'm doing is I'm increasing the balance, and with the money withdrawn, I'm decreasing the balance. And that basically, we take this bit of code, we run it through our event stream to whichever point we want, and that will return the balance. And basically, this is how we're doing it. So we pass in the as of date as a parameter, we run the projection to that as of date, and then we just return the result in a nice friendly bit of text. And as I mentioned earlier, as well as returning the value, the current balance, it also returns the sequence number as of which that balance was valid, which is, as I say, is an important thing you're doing. If you end up doing event sourcing, I would definitely recommend that every time you run a projection, you also give that bit of data back. And so that's what it looks like in the front end. Well, in my version of the front end. obviously this will be wrapped in something much nicer if you were going to give it to production. Okay, the third bit to illustrate how things get a little bit harder. So making a withdrawal. So we have a target account must exist. We already know how to do that. But the second part is that the balance must be greater than or equal to the withdrawal amount. So you can't, in this version of the bank account, you can't go withdrawn. And this introduces yet another concurrency crocodile, because while I'm making this withdrawal and performing these tests, you could also be either doing another withdrawal, or you could be doing a, well, all sorts of different transactions. So I need to know whether I can rely on the balance that I have got before I actually make the withdrawal. And obviously, withdrawal amount is a parameter passed in. So for this one, we're going to have two parameters. We have our event stream, which we're going to append the events if everything's successful, but we also need to run the balance projection. So we run the balance projection to tell us whether we're able to make the withdrawal. And the way that that happens is we run the balance projection first. If the current balance is greater than or equal to the amount to be withdrawn, then we can go ahead and make the withdrawal. So we put our withdrawal event together and we append it. But we also have this parameter here, the current sequence number, and that's passed in when you're appending an event, or optionally passed in. If you pass it in, then if that isn't the current top sequence number of the event stream when it goes ahead and appends the event, it actually throws an exception. So this is to prevent you getting into a concurrency situation. How you handle that exception is entirely up to you. You need to have a little business discussion and say, what do we do? Can we retry it? Do we put it on a failure queue, etc.? But basically, at this level, what we're saying is we can't allow the withdrawal to go in if it would result in the balance being overdrawn. And if we aren't on the current sequence number when we've run our projection, we don't know for a fact that our balance that we have used in this if clause is still valid. And this is how it looks. So what we're saying is when you run it and you don't have sufficient funds, it's going to return a thing in there saying your account number did not have sufficient funds. Hey, another pause for any questions at that point. Nope.
Nope, doesn't seem to be any questions. Obviously doing a
job. Well, either I am or the crocodiles are. Okay, notifications. So we have built a system so far that allows you to get data into it and relatively safely get data into it. I always say relatively because if you say safely, it'll go wrong and then you'll have made a promise you can't keep. But that's only half the purpose of our system. We also need to have the fact that things have occurred in one part of a system passed over to other parts of the system to create other, to kick off other functionality. And I mean, a good example of that might be, well, if we have a new bank account created, we might want the post room to send them a welcome pack. So we get a notification from that the new entity was created, and we use it to basically put together the next step. And I have two forms of notifications here coming off each event stream. The first one is a new entity was created. So in our example, the bank account, and that just passes as parameters the domain, the entity type, and the instance, so the unique key of whatever was created. And the second one is whenever an event is appended to an event stream, it raises a notification with the domain, entity type, and also event type. So if the event type was money withdrawn, your notification would be bank.account.money withdrawn. It also sends the sequence number, as we were talking about before. That's always important if you are relying on state downstream. And the event details payload can be included. So with our withdrawal event, you would also include the amount withdrawn and so on. And this gives you a sort of, it's very analogous to a change feed in a database. So it's a change feed for event streams. In addition, whenever a projection is run and completes, I also send out a notification that the projection has run and completed. And the idea behind this is to reduce the amount of work done getting state. really cares about reference data or whatever, your system that's updating the reference data, sorry, I've got a bad network quality there. Your system that's updating the data may, may want to know about these notifications, but it doesn't need to keep asking for projections itself. Okay, so that's all done through Event Grid, and I send out the notifications to Event Grid as custom topics and custom events. And then Event Grid allows you to pub/sub situation. It allows you to send that on to other parts of your system, which can be written in many different ways. You can have Azure functions or logic apps or automation or webhooks. I use Azure functions, but that's personal preference. You can, as I say, you can have it react to change in any way. There are a couple of caveats first that you need to be aware of. So Event Grid is an always on system. So there is a continuous cost to running Event Grid. It's a shared system, so it's not a particularly high continuous cost, but it is something that you are, you do need to be aware of. And the second one is that Event Grid's promise is at least once delivery. So every event will be delivered at least once. What that means practically is that it will be delivered at least once, sometimes twice, occasionally 3 times, and so on. So what that means is your receiving systems have to be able to deal with the fact that they may have received the same information twice. And that again is another reason why I always put the sequence number in when I'm doing a projection. You need your receiving systems to be able to say, okay, I've already received this information, I don't need to act on it this time. And you would code it that way. Event Grid allows you to filter those messages on their way to the output. So what we would do is, using the event types there, we'd say, okay, some functionality cares about interest being paid, so that will be filtered by bank.account.interest_paid. That's our event type, and so on. And some functionality might care about a new bank account being created, so that would look for event type of new entity with the prefix filter being bank account. So we're saying a new bank account was created. You can filter by the content of the event message as well. And if you want to do, but it's not my preference. I prefer to have a bit more of a visible system. So I name my Event Grid filters on whatever has happened, and I have them going by event type if possible. And what does it look like in the message? So we have got our, this is the message content received by whatever you have got hooked up as a subscriber. You have your notification unique identifier. You have the details of what the event happened to. So we've got domain name, entity type, and instance key, and also the sequence number. And in addition to that, you've got the actual data. So the current balance was 5048.28. The sequence number was 118. Don't worry about snapshots. That's for an advanced version, which I have not written yet. Okay, and then how would you hook everything together? So in serverless, the concept of applications and domains is a little bit nebulous, because basically you would create your functions in whatever account, sorry, whatever application you want, and organize them how you would. They will be launched from each other and whatever. So it's a little bit tenuous. This here is an overview that is a logical overview. Then you might not deploy things this way, but this is how you might think about them. And essentially, we have our 3 domains with commands and queries going into them from the outside world. And then when changes occur to them, they send notifications which other ones can pick up on. So as I mentioned earlier, if your bank account, if you have a withdrawal, that might notify another thing in the branch thing to do something behind the scenes, or if a new product is launched, it might alter your what's available in the branch, and so on. So systems can listen to each other in that manner. So handling a command coming in from the outside world. So we pass in the command name, parameters, and context. So context is user ID, IP address, all the sort of where did this account come from. and that goes into event grid. An event grid then fires up a durable function orchestration. So this is Azure durable functions, and behind the scenes, that then creates its own event stream. Now, a bit of disambiguity here. I mean the event stream from my system, not the event stream that durable functions itself uses, because behind the scenes durable functions also use event sourcing. But so what I'm talking about is a unique event stream for this command. And validations are performed as a durable functions activity. So whatever, is whatever was passed in valid? Is the command well formed, and are the parameters sensible, and so on. And if that is all good, that's pasted. That's the written back to the event stream. And then the actual command is executed. So the events are appended to the underlying event streams of the thing that gets changed. So if you imagine here, we're doing a withdrawal, for example, you do your withdrawal validations, and then you append the withdrawal amounts on whichever event streams are being updated. And as I say, that's all through event grid. So how does it look? We are kicking off a durable function context. So that's saying, OK, I want to perform this action. That then kicks off the activities for each action in turn. So what I'm showing in this example is actually applying interest for all the accounts. So this is to show how one command can actually act on many different underlying event streams. And the way I'm doing that is you kick off the command, and then you do a fan out orchestration that says for each account number, perform the job of applying the interest. The fan out sub orchestration just works on one event stream. So basically we're saying this is going to be kicked off by durable functions for every single event stream that I want updating. And then on each one, this little sub orchestration will work. It will finish and it'll go back to the main orchestration when it's complete. A query is done very much the same way. The only difference with the query is that I also allow you to pass in return addresses. So return addresses are where do you want the answer to your query delivered. So you start with the query name, parameters, etc. And you also have to add on either a webhook or an address or email address or whatever, however you're returning the data. And behind the scenes, again, that kicks off a event stream that is unique to this query. So this particular query has its own event stream, so it can track progress.
Quick question just come in there, Duncan, if you...
Yeah, fire ahead.
Somebody's wondering how do you get a unique sequence number? Do you use some sort of locking mechanism?
I do, yes. So the unique sequence number comes from the bottom, what would you call it, the index record. So the index record, when you update that, it has a E tag to say nobody else has attempted to update it at the same time. And the way you generate the next sequence number is you say, OK, what is the current sequence number? Update it and save it. And if that update and save succeeds, you're allowed to use that sequence number. So yeah, it's an auto increment that has been implemented by myself, and it's not necessarily brilliant, but it's the only way I was able to do it on Azure tables. I wouldn't recommend trying to run a query to get the highest one. I started off doing that, and that is not performant at all. Yeah, so don't do that.
Expensive, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, carry on.
All right, no problem. So, okay, so we've done our query validations. We're saying, is it possible to run this query? Always worth doing that before you run the query, because you save yourself a bit of processing time. And then we run all the projections that are needed to fulfill the query. So if you remember right back to the balance projection in episode 1, if you remember back to that, if we wanted to get the balance of a number of accounts, you pass that in and then you run those projections in parallel using the same fan out methodology. And then when the answers come back, you can then do a collate state. So it's not a million miles away from MapReduce in concept, but basically what we're saying is if you need to get data from many things, many entities, you can run that in parallel and have it all come back together again to give you your answer. And then obviously your return addresses, you return the result to everyone who is interested in it. So this also allows you to do things like logging and things like that, where you say, okay, whenever a query is created, also add a return address of the logging system. And the way that works is we kick up our, this is our query event stream. We have our query, and then basically we request the projections and we put them on that as an event. So let's say we need 10 balance projections. We put each request for that balance projection onto our event stream, and then we're able to run them in parallel using this query orchestrator. So we're basically saying for every projection that hasn't completed yet, go ahead and start it running. And then this is done as an Azure durable function task, and then it will return back to the parent orchestration when it's complete. Okay, code and architecture recap, just to pause there and see where we've got to. So the system hangs together with event grid function triggers. The system is based on event sourcing with Azure function. And basically the queries and commands are done with durable functions. And the main way that that works is to have fan out going on behind the scenes. And everything, the data for everything is stored in event streams and projections. There's a GitHub there that has all the source code to this. And I think reasonably well commented, but certainly if you have any questions on it, get back to me on that GitHub and I will clean it up, but it is there.
That is a quick question there.
Oh yeah.
Oh right, is that the end already?
Well, no, go for a Q&A.
No, just while you're on the one that said architecture there, we've actually just had a question in about that. It says, solution looks great, has a lot of moving messages, event grid, message types, event stream topics, notifications, and so on. It says, as an application architect, you clearly plan before you code. Can you talk about how you'd architect, plan, and document your solution for what's a serverless microarchitecture, like tools you use, for example?
Yeah, okay. Quite an assumption about my professionalism there, but anyway, okay. Yeah, so design is really important with this, actually up front. So before you start coding, because what happens is when you've written even a serverless function, when you've written it, it's really hard to go, well, that was wrong, and delete it. You know, you become attached to it. So the more you can do on paper, on whiteboards, in screaming arguments, in boardrooms or whatever, the better. And the best technique for finding your events and finding your how everything hangs together is something called event storming, which is a sort of, you get an enormous sheet of paper and you basically all start putting up events and things, and then you basically collaboratively work out what belongs where and what causes what and so on. And I would do quite a few iterations of that before you get down to coding it. But in terms of tooling, there isn't great tooling for this, which is the bottom line. There isn't great tooling for visualizing a serverless system, and there isn't really great tooling for designing it, because as you can see, I've just got functions coded there. I'm giving them the function name, but it could be, I could have given it the wrong name, and then then I won't know that that's happened. I won't know that I'm calling the wrong function or whatever. Yeah,
and I've seen event storming. The tooling has literally been a wall and sticky notes.
That's precisely how I do it. Yeah, so you go to IKEA, which is the cheapest place you can buy these things. You get the really long roll of paper, and you stick it up on the boardroom, and basically start putting the events on. And someone comes in, or you get all the experts you can in, and you get them to disagree with you. And you move everything around, and then you go for lunch, and you come back and you go, yeah, we were completely wrong, and you do it again, and do it several times, and you will end up with something approaching the correct thing. But you can change things after the fact as well. So one of the things that I would recommend for event source system is actually event versioning. So if you have a situation where you have created an event and it's been in production for a little while, and you realize that you have got it wrong, you've maybe got too few parameters, or your parameters are wrong, or whatever, you can create a version 1, version 2, version 3, etc. And then you just need to create an anti-corruption layer bit of code to turn a version 1 into a version 2 if your projection is looking for a version 2. So it is possible to do in the same way as you would do that if you got a database design wrong.
And there's another question here. What are the best practices for tracing the events?
Oh, okay, that's a good point. I'm going to Alt tab out of this thing here, and so if you forgive me half a second, let me just show you. So this is the notifications on Azure. So when an event occurs, these are my notifications. So you can see them actually, how many. So we've had 3 in the last hour or so. If I span it out to 12 hours and so on, you can see what's happening there. But if you want to drill into it, I would recommend having your functions go into application insights and use that to do your detailed work. Now
put it into a structured log query sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So because everything that happens is an Azure function, and that Azure function can be hooked up to application insights, you can look into, let's say the bank account opened command. You can look into that and say, what parameters were passed in, what was the state, and so on. You can actually see that in insights. So that's how that would work. And then because you've got filtering going on, you can actually drill down into this. So if you, for example, wanted to put together one of those dashboards that my management are so keen on, you could say, okay, I'm just going to filter by, let's say, account opened, and I can show you a lovely little graph of how many accounts have been opened in the last 30 days or whatever, without adding any more code and without using up any more of my time.
Okay, that's the questions for now.
Okay, that's brilliant. So let me quickly show you the bit that can go wrong, because I'm going to have to connect to the back end here. So I have got Postman, developer's friend. So we'll start with this account does not exist. So I've called it GA 2020 test 01. That's my account number there. Start with that. If I send the message, fire enough, and it comes back with this account is not yet created. So I was not able to retrieve a balance for it. So I will go in and open an account. So you can see here, these are my parameters that I'm passing in, just to show you that this is actually real and live. Let's put 1901 as our opening balance and name Duncan Jones Azure. Oh, just to prove that I'm not cheating you here, because you're not paying customers, so you don't have to be cheated. Okay, so I send that off, and it says it has created it. If I now go back to my Azure portal and look in the Storage Explorer, so that's my unique key that I passed in. That was my account number. If I run the query now, we have our events there. So you see the first row key, all zeros, that's my index thing, and that says there are 3, the last sequence number is 3. So there are 3 events that have occurred to this thing. The things that have occurred, that's event type, was account opened, money deposited, and designated beneficiary set. So you can see there, if you want to see the money deposited, you can go across here, and you can see that 1901 was deposited. Oh, bring up all the details there, the date and time it happened, and so on. So it exists, and data has gone into it. We can go back to get our balance, send that. It does exist, and it has a balance of 1901. I'll go ahead and deposit some money. Let's look at the body. Okay. Send that. And again, it's saying the amount was deposited. Let's go quickly back to the portal and see if I run this query again. Okay, so you can see the deposit has occurred there. And then let's try an outrageously large withdrawal and make sure that it doesn't allow us to do that. So outrageously large withdrawal. Let's go to our body, and we are going to send that, and it's going to say it doesn't have sufficient funds. The current balance is 4021, and therefore it didn't actually append the event. And I'll go back and just prove that for myself as much as for anyone else, because that was a bit okay. So it hasn't put the withdrawal amount on. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that I've done to do with accruing interest and all that kind of stuff as well. But this will give you an idea of what's going on. I'll actually withdraw a sensible amount and just make sure it does work. Okay, so now it is, and it gives you the new balance and so on. And if I just go back to there, run the query again, and you can see those are the things. Now, when I'm doing a multi-step command, the multi-step command also has an event stream behind it. So for each command that has ever run, I can have this kind of detail that says, okay, the command came in, these were the parameters that were assigned to it. This was the result of the validation. These things were kicked off and so on. So it does allow you to have quite a deep dive into the processing part of your application as well. And I'll just show you as well that all of that messing should have created some events. If I go back to 1 hour. Yeah, so us doing that work there has triggered a bunch of event grid messages as well. I would imagine the two appends, the create and the projection. So
Duncan, we've got another question in the chat.
Go ahead, yeah.
Is there a reason that you've not mentioned read models?
Time constraint. So
Can't come at all.
No, so when I did the query, so the query, you put in a bunch of targets, return addresses, basically. That could be your user interface if you want the information straight back, but it could also be a downstream data system, which would be a read model. So that could be either a straightforward database, a data warehouse. Flat files is very good, and my favorite read model of all, which is pre-built HTML, because that is really fast at loading. So yeah, you can build that with this. I don't have any preference whatsoever where the data from queries goes, but I would call most of those read models, apart from the live interactive version. And the other thing is, of course, with Azure Functions, you can kick them off on a schedule, or you could have a different thing causing the event grid to kick it off or whatever. So it doesn't have to be a user performing the query. It could also be a nightly batch, or it could be, you know, when we realize X number of things have happened, we kick off a query or whatever. So you can do it that way.
Well, we're paused. There's another question in here, also mentioning read models. For the withdrawal command, are you recalculating the current state of the account, so fully rerunning the projection, or are you relying on a saved read model somewhere when you're performing the business logic relating to the withdrawal amount?
I am relying on the calculated amount, so I run the projection every time. The projection code. The projection code does allow for snapshots, so that's what that earlier thing where I said support snapshots and it was false. For projections that it makes sense to have a snapshot, so a balance would be a very good example. Your balance as at event number 4 is always going to be the same, so it's perfectly legitimate to save that somewhere and then reload that rather than what would you call it, rather than running it through the full history. But for this kind of system, it is relatively fast until you get history of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 events. It's kind of designed for wide and shallow data systems. So basically you've got many entities, but each of those entities has got a relatively short lifespan. So bank accounts, maybe not a great example, but commands and queries and whatever, you might have 20 steps on a standard command handler or command saga or whatever you want to call it. So it is not going to be slow to recreate the whole thing.
And apparently you preempted his next question.
Oh, okay. I mean, I can prove myself wrong. So this one has got a decent number of events. So this is, as I was saying, this is my horrendous UI. But what we're basically saying is if I want to run this, get the balance for as of today, fire that off. It is going to take a couple of seconds. It took 0.92 seconds to execute that, and it's 1,390 events. It basically goes reasonably linearly. So, you know, it would take, if you had 10 times as many, it would take 10 seconds to return the result. Obviously, if you have an interactive system, like if this was your actual bank account, you would return a cached version of the page as of last night that you would generate automatically, and then behind the scenes you would update any new events and present them in a slightly different thing, saying, and then you call them something like uncleared or whatever you want to do. But basically, you hide the processing time from the user. And this is what my bank, actually, Bank of Ireland, actually do. I know this because I can sometimes see the same transaction in both the cached version from last night and the to be processed version today. So, you know, they're obviously got a bit of eventual consistency going on.
Right. That's it for questions at the moment.
Okie dokie. So I will post the GitHub and the URL of this little play bank account version. And yeah, thank you very much for lending me your time. Brilliant.
Thank you. Just one question from my point of view, just kind of trailing my own talk later on. Do you ever feel the urge to sort of break out of Azure Functions? Is there anything, you ever think, well, actually, this doesn't fit the serverless model?
Yes. So, yeah, I wouldn't really design an entire system with either serverless or with event sourcing. I mean, I would consider it to be a partial, to a partial solution. So there are going to be bits that it doesn't make sense to do. And what I would say is anything to do with reporting, what if analysis, all that kind of stuff that people do using Excel, or if you're as old as me, even Crystal reports. That kind of stuff. Yeah. Oh my God, I've got the scars. But that kind of stuff probably isn't serverless. But I will say, especially with durable functions, now that durable functions is there aren't that many things. I'm surprised how few things I get to do and go, well, that really doesn't suit, and I'm going to have to either have a physical server or spin up a VM for this or whatever. But that may be my business domain rather than a sort of general thing for everyone. Oh, and the other thing that people do get interested in is the cost. Let me see if I've got the cost here. So this is a example system that has 20,000 bank accounts in, and each bank account. So there's a bunch of random things happen to try and do withdrawals and deposits and whatever. So 20,000, they all have interest accrued daily, paid monthly. They have up 10 or so accounts, transactions per day, and so on. And it comes in at about €1 a day. And the other thing about that is if you drill down into that, most of that cost is actually application insights rather than the thing itself. I can't live without application insights, but it is true to say that it's not 3/4 of that money. No, it's not. But 3/4 of that money is actually the debugging and tracing and everything else.
Yeah. And I know Microsoft try and push Cosmos as an events sourcing solution on the grounds that you can use it as your event storage and your event source, if you sort of mean by using the change feed off the collection in Cosmos. Have you done that? Because I would imagine that cost of that would probably push you up a bit.
I haven't, but I do know people who have working for Jet, Jet.com.
Oh yeah, the Walmart.
Yes, exactly. So that's all Cosmos DB backed and event source, and it's done in F#. as far as I know, there's quite a lot of their stuff open source. So if that's the where you're going down, that it is definitely is doable, and it's obviously doable at considerable scale. So but yes, the reason I'm doing this is because this is a thing to scale to 0. So it's for things where maybe for 3 months of the year it's intensely used, and then it's not used. Maybe every other day is used or something like that. Or if it was an event, so let's say you had a mini marathon, and the registrations come pouring in the week before, and then people run the event, and then nothing happens or whatever. It's really about the very rapid up and down of demand. So as long as if you've got something where you do want it to scale to as near to 0 as possible, then this is a good solution for that.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that session. Lots of people in the chat saying thank you. Great talk. So that's good.
Thank you very much.
No worries. Just to let everyone know, I'm going to pause recording and then restart recording. Next up, we've got Jamie Maguire talking about bot frameworks. And we have a new co-host as well. So Mark, before you leave our session as a co-host, do you want to plug your talk in the other track?
Well, yeah, my talk is on track 1 at 3, I think it is. I hope it's 3, otherwise I'm going to get in trouble. And that will be about running serverless style systems, but on AKS rather than Azure Functions.